Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening to talk about some amazing artwork with some incredibly talented artists. We're here for an artist talk about the exhibition Take Yourself There, which is currently on display at the Silk Purse Arts Center in West Vancouver. My name is Stephen Snyder. I'm the Gallery and Communications Manager for the West Vancouver Community Arts Council, and we present all of the arts and culture programming that happens at the Silk Purse, which, as I said, is here in West Vancouver, next to beautiful John Lawson Park on the waterfront, which is on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. Here that is the Squamish Nation, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and Musqueam Nation, and we're incredibly grateful and honored and proud to be able to be on these lands with our host nations and celebrating arts and culture with and alongside them. And joining us, we have three of the four artists on display. We have Patti Henderson, Amber Nordstrand, and Emily Van Lidth de Jeude, and we'll get to meet them all in just a second. If you have any questions for our artists, you can drop those in the chat, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation. So Take Yourself There, which is, as we said, is on display at the Silk Purse. It is up until August the 18th. So if you're watching this live or you're watching this before then, please come on down and check it out. It's a really transformative exhibit. It's really emotive and thought-provoking. I think you will all really enjoy it. So without further ado, let's meet our fantastic artists. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves. Let's start with, to my left, Patti. Patti, could you please introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Hello, I'm Patti Henderson. I consider myself a storyteller because I tell stories in a variety of mediums. I started out as a writer, and I'm also a filmmaker, and this is my first art exhibition for my art, which I collaborated with my creative friend, and her name is Katarina Thorsen. She's not with us tonight. She's actually on a deadline for her graphic novel, which is coming up to be published in 2025. But Katarina is also a visual artist, a writer, illustrator, researcher. She's published a book before. So we have been friends for, we realized today, 31 years, because it's July 31st. So we've been friends and collaborators for that long, and she helps me on my projects and I help her on her projects, and this is a collaboration that we're happy to share with everybody at the Silk Purse. Thanks.
Awesome, excellent. Thank you so much, Patti, for being here and representing Katarina. Next, Emily, could you please tell us a bit about you?
Hi. Okay. Well, I don't know what to say. Actually, I say okay like I'm confident. I usually actually do installations. So I've been working on the series that's here in this show for quite a long time, almost 10 years actually, but I've never actually shown such personal work, really. Like, my installations are usually gathering of ideas, story, and experience from other people and turning it into something immersive. And I usually leave myself out because that's easier. But yeah, so this is kind of a new adventure for me to show some of my more personal work. And I guess everything I do still has to do with story and personal growth, societal growth. I like things like that. Yeah. And besides that, but also really, I think, very connected to that, I live on a very small farm where we grow most of, well, maybe half our own food. And yeah, I used to, before COVID, be an explorative education, mostly art and wilderness education leader. So that's also like child development, societal development, all those things, garden, food development. I love growth. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Anyway.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. And then finally, Amber, could you please introduce yourself?
My turn. My name is Amber Nordstrand. I'm an artist from Port Coquitlam. I'm living in Vancouver right now. I have a background in theater and film. I primarily work as a production designer on set, so buying, sourcing, creating props, and setting that up. I'm a self-taught painter, which is what brings me here. I've recently started taking my paintings a little more seriously and under the encouragement of friends and family, submitting to galleries and exhibitions. And this is my third exhibition in the last year, which is a really nice streak. And we'll see what happens next. I paint abandoned houses. I always have. I'm growing a steady collection of them, and that's what's featured here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing that little bit about yourselves. A few tantalizing tidbits, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later as we talk more about the work that's currently on display. Speaking of which, we're going to take a quick tour of the show to give you all a little taste of what it's like. It's again a beautiful exhibit, and this tour is not going to do it the justice that it deserves. So please come on down and check it out. Oh, sorry a second, I've just lost my video. There we go. Excellent. So yeah, this is just quickly coming in off of our waterfront entrance at the Silk Purse here in Ambleside. We had Emily's fantastic pieces, and now here's just a quick little view of Amber's paintings. You can get a feel for the layout of the gallery and what it's like. And then move on to Patti and Katarina's collaborative work. Yeah, so as you can see, it's this fascinating collage work with, photos and embroidery and all these layers and painting and illustration. I have to say, Patti, it's a really fascinating combination of media that I don't think many of our audience were expecting at first. I think everyone kind of thought a lot of them were just photographs at first and didn't realize how many layers and what sort of media was in. Yeah, then move on to these fantastic painted collages, which also have some embroidery in them. And next we get to Amber's fantastic gouache and acrylic ink paintings. Which again, unexpected, I think, for some of our visitors. I've heard some comments. Just the subject of abandoned houses is really intriguing to people who've come into the exhibit so far. Just really, just an unexpected subject, I think, for most people. So it's very cool to see their reactions. Yeah, there's a lot of great detail. Yeah, a lot of sort of painterly areas to leave things a little ambiguous. Yeah, so now we're getting to see some of Emily's work, this fantastic quadriptych. Is that the right term? It's more like 8 pieces, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is yeah, it's again unexpected. I think I'm using that word a lot, but that's I think one of the fascinating things about this exhibit is visitors coming in so far are really taken aback with everything that you've all done. Seeing these 8 canvases tell one larger story has been really fascinating to see people interpret and just sort of take in because it's so large too. And again, a lot of great mark making and rendering. And then the final piece, which is also Emily's, this beautiful painting on this christening gown. So that's the show in a nutshell. Again, just a quick overview. There are so many details and layers to come in and experience for yourself. I really recommend people coming in and checking it out. So now each of the artists has selected a work to discuss a little bit more in depth to give you sort of a better idea of where they're coming from with their bodies of work that are on display as artists. So first up, what's the first one here? The first one, we just saw it, would be Emily. So I'm going to pull up the piece that you had chosen. Emily, could you please, tell us about this this amazing piece?
Sure, thank you. So this one is called "Will You Love My Heart," which is a line from Sinead O'Connor's song "Love Is Ours," which is incredibly difficult to find online for some reason, but it's from her album. I can't say the name. She Who Walks. It's the longest album title in the world, and I can't say it right now. But anyway, and this is a self-portrait. So this is me at 1, 4, 11, and 16. And yeah, I guess I should talk about this thing about why it's to a song. So I'm a synesthete, or I have synesthesia, however you want to think about that. Basically, I see sound. Synesthesia can be all kinds of mixing of experience, but basically I see sound. I think actually a whole lot more people do than realize it. But anyway, because of this, and because I was raised in a family of traditional musicians, I'm a ballad singer. So I just paint music. And basically what I'm painting is my visual experience of whatever song or sounds or even emotion that I'm working with. Emotion is like a visual experience for me too, I think, and for a lot of people. So basically I'll have an idea I want to work with. Like I chose this sort of setup of me at 4 times of my childhood. In a kind of symbolic way. But then I'd choose a song. And in this case, I chose this Sinead O'Connor song that really speaks to me and my kind of childhood and growing through trauma experience. And then I just play it on repeat, literally hundreds of times while painting. Or sometimes I let the whole album play just for some variety. But basically, that's how it works. So the song itself, this song is about kind of holding on to the pieces of our broken hearts. This sounds so tragic, but it's also about supporting each other and like growing together into a bigger wholeness. So like you see me growing up here, and then in the third portrait, I'm kind of like growing up into the circle stuff, whatever's going on, into the bigger world. But then in the last portrait, I've sort of been shoved back down into my little trauma box, or whatever you want to call it, or however you want to see it as a different person. Like we all have our own experience, and I really hope people bring their experience to their interpretation. So yeah, I feel like this is actually a really hopeful but semi-dark portrait. I like many, maybe most people, live with intergenerational trauma from my various grandparents and great-grandparents as grandparents. I mean, experience of wars and famines, the Great Depression, all the things that have happened, and, you know, basically all the fallout from colonialism and capitalism. Plus, I'm a mother of 2 grown children, and I have an amazing parents who have done everything they could to raise me out of those traumas, and then I've done everything I could. And so I think we're like, with every generation, for me, the like the four partness of this piece is kind of like splitting my childhood into parts, but also it's a reference to the generations and how with each generation we sort of overcome some of the physical and emotional fallout from all the trauma. And of course, we meet new trauma, but hopefully, as the generations and as our own personal lives carry on, we also build upon previous generations' learning. So, like, we're building out into the future with, you know, more compassion and genuine love. Yeah. And I guess I could talk about the technical parts of the work in case anybody's interested. It's basically just a lot of layers of graphite and oil glazes mostly. Actually, I should say I do. Oh, and I brought, I don't know if you can see this or if it even matters, but I did bring a little piece that's similar. And those lines that you see are actually acrylic pour. So I'll kind of just throw acrylic, and then I will put some, like, I'll scribble with graphite into it, or with my trusty palette knives or actual knives, whatever seems useful in the moment. I don't know if you can even see this, but it's just, these are my old things I have laying around the studio. And basically I'll just scrape into it, and it's really, I'm following the song, so I don't know how it's going to come out, but I will just keep adding layers of glaze and scratching into it with pencils. Oh, and my amazing gigantic graphite that I love. Ooh,
Oh, wow.
I know, I love this. I won't touch it or everything will be gray, but it's beautiful. And just, I guess in all the layers, I feel like I really like symbolism, but in addition to being a symbolic working of different layers emotionally, it also means like the work is always evolving. And so, like, I get to really work with it. It's not like I have a plan and then I execute my plan. I kind of have a symbolic plan, but then that becomes something that I have actually grown through the process of making it. And I think for me personally, that has a lot to do with the process of like adding and scratching away. And I don't know. Anyway, that's all I can think of to say about the technique right now. But as much as you can call it technique, it's just experimentation. I love experimentation. I think that's if there are machines that can do everything else, all we can do is like emotional expressionism or experimentation, you know? So we might as well do it with abandon. I don't know. That's how I feel. Anyway.
Yeah. Here. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Emily.
You.
And again, thank you for mentioning how important music is for you in, I guess, just in general, but also in your creative process. I think that's something a lot of creatives can relate to. But also something very cool about this exhibit is that there is you've come together to create a playlist specifically for the show. That's just so cool. I can't remember who came up with that idea, but how was that process like for you? Did you just add the songs you listened to while you were creating, or did you add other things?
Okay, well, full disclosure, we decided to do the playlist on Spotify, and Spotify does not have the actual song that I made this painting to. So unfortunately, it's not on there. But so I was just going along finding things that felt to me like the kind of work that I feel is about growth, personal or societal or whatever. But then as I was doing it, I kept going into Patti, who was doing hers, I think at the same time. Anyway, I seemed to keep seeing new things that she was putting in. And then I would like discover new music. It was awesome. What a great collaborative process.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think how it worked for us was we had all decided, we had talked about a soundscape, and with the soundscape, we kind of just decided how best would we be able to share it. So it became Spotify. But I think I'm also a very musical individual in terms of it provokes imagery for me. So it's very necessary part of my existence as well. So as an artist and as a creative, it's part of my process too.
Yeah. Yeah. I suspect
Yeah.
actually really for a lot of people, we have a lot of crossing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to admit this, but I also usually dance while I'm painting. Like, it's just chaos. But I feel like so much of our creativity and also just kind of connection with our own brain goes through our various movements and senses. And so I think it's natural that all art kind of integrates with others.
Yeah, definitely. And that integration is a little bit kind of touches on this idea of growth, which you also are very interested in. And I think that's fascinating because that you'll kind of probably hear a lot of similar things with the rest of the artwork, but a lot of this is sort of looking back at elements of the past and where we are now and where we can be in the future. And I think taking a personal approach to that is fascinating, right? Because we could all do a historical sort of work, right, that's documenting a very specific period in time. But with this going into maybe what it means for you or how you went through it, I think adds a little bit more of a layer because if that's how we get to connect, that's how we get to know, right? Is the general is great, but when we get into the specifics is where we can really find each other.
Yeah, I think because a lot of my work, really most of my installations have been some kind of collection of interviews, really, that then either I've painted portraits of other people, or in one case I had videos kind of crossing each other. And so you're seeing other people, and I I still love that concept, having kind of a combined total that really shows you how in the very best way not unique we are. Like that almost all of our experience is ubiquitous in some way, especially emotional experience. And it's almost like in the total of these big collections of people's stories, you see the commonality, and that will relate personally. However, you do lose some kind of immediacy, like if I'm telling my own story, there is no filter. I mean, partly because I have no filter sometimes, but I mean, I mean, there's not me as the artist filtering someone's story into the exhibit. It's just me. And I think sometimes that almost makes it harder to not relate to something, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. Again, well, thank you for sharing these insights, and I think a lot of things we'll hear some echoes and some different perspectives and some new things. I think there's a lot of really wonderful personal approaches that all of our artists have taken with this exhibit. So now we're going to move on to okay. Patti Patti and Katarina have chosen two pieces to discuss, one sort of, I guess, representing what each artist kind of brought to the project. So Patti, could you please tell us about this first piece?
Yes. Okay. So how Katarina and I have this relationship of creativity where um, we trust each other in what we're going to bring to the piece. Uh, this these pieces were created during COVID, and interestingly, there's two that are very kind of autobiographical for me. There's two that are very much just COVID and society vibe. And then two that are Katarina's paintings that then I cut up and reimagined, re-collaged, but we'll get to that. This one was very interesting because what I had done during COVID was I had gone and I would walk every day and take photographs, share my photographs with friends. And so it gave me a purpose and it gave connection to my friends. And as I was doing this, I thought, oh, it'd be interesting to do a kind of a collaboration with other artists. And so I said to Katarina, maybe we should, what if I gave her the concept and let her go with it. Interestingly, because also in 2019, right at around Christmas time, I had found and met for the first time in my life my birth mother. And I had been orphaned kind of by the time I was 15 from my adopted parents. So I always considered myself what they call a dandelion child, which is you're kind of scattered to the wind and you plant yourself and grow wherever you can. So it was very interesting because I always take photographs of these dandelions. And so I kind of left it with Katarina to do things. And this was a very different piece from the other pieces. All of a sudden there's an image of me, and yet it shows me all connected and growing and changing and a new existence. So most of our in this sequence, in this stuff, if it hasn't been specific, when we work together, it's process. And like I say, it's trust of this is what I am bringing, this is what I'm offering, this is what I'm thinking, and then the other person is allowed to interpret and move forward with it. And I have to say that I was very a bit inhibited about wanting to show myself this and another piece. And Katarina said, that is your growth, is you have to show yourself. You have to be seen. You are now seen by being, no longer an orphan. I call myself a found orphan. So it was very interesting. So that to me is a lot about this piece. And yeah, it's that. I have nothing more to say other than it's unnerving for me.
But
But
that's
necessary.
yeah. Yeah, it's good to be pushed and challenged sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And that is the blessing of working with another artist that you completely trust. There's times like on the other piece, I was trying to rip my little face off of it. And she said, you can't take that off of the photo. You can't take it off. It's part of you looking at life. And I'm like, oh, okay. All I saw was me and I wanted it off. But it is interesting. And I enjoy that part of it because as we were talking about growth and I think as artists, that's part of our journey, but also necessity to grow and express and then move forward, move through, continue.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing again these fascinating insights. Let's move on to the next piece. Could you tell us about this very interesting work?
Yes. So this is Katarina's, I believe it's her grandmother, Stina. So Katarina is originally from Sweden, and they immigrated to Canada in her youth, but she had spent her formative early years in Sweden. She was doing a kind of a retrospect on immigration, and for her immigration. She had done a show at the Nordic Museum in Seattle previous to this. And she was then moving on to this, and then life happened and other things happened. And this literal painting was on a drop sheet that was part of all of our lives for like 20 years. She'd painted it. She had, it was, we'd use it to sit on at the beach. Like it was this weird thing that it just, it was part of Katarina. And then as we were talking about these, how to kind of reconstruct your world when things change, i.e. the pandemic, or for myself meeting my birth mother and finding out about my heritage. It was very interesting because she said, cut it up, reimagine it. So she allowed me to do what I allowed her to do with my other piece, which is, here it is, do what you want. And so I cut up this giant piece of artwork and restructured it. And I like this piece in particular because of how the bottom is off. So it's like your feet are somewhere else and your body is somewhere else. Like it's the kind of an immigration concept for me, how I put it together. And then we always tend to, we love collage. We love things being, I either love things being very wide and like image wise, I look at things, let's say, as because I'm a visual learner and filmmaker, but then the writer in me wants details. So I like little details. So that's a large part of why there's also the embroidery and found pieces. And I mean, that's just, again, process. We don't really, just like Emily said, we don't have a specific idea. I come at things with, this is what I'm thinking concept wise, and then it creates itself. And like I always say to people, because when I first was in university and was studying print and broadcast journalism, I remember all of the writers, we all thought, how do we have our voice? Like, how, if we are writing in Canadian press style and we all get the same story, how are we unique? And one of my professors said, it will always be through your voice, that nothing is exactly the same. Given all parameters, you will always it'll be filtered through you. And, that as we always say, the experience is communal. with everyone experiences very similar life events, birth, death, growth, things. And but then how it affects us, our resilience, or whatever brings us to the next stage of our life, is for everyone, that we all have to walk the path. So it was a very interesting combination for me to be able to take one of Katarina's pieces that I'd known so long and create a new image for her. So it was for her also an opportunity to see her life in a different way, her heritage.
Yeah. What a fascinating project to work with someone on, this, as you said, this reimagining, this retelling of stories. That's very cool. And as you said, has brought up some interesting emotions for the both of you.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah.
This idea of collage work and reworking materials, and working with all these different materials, has that always been part of your artistic practice? 'Cause I know, as you said, you're mostly a filmmaker.
Yes. I think film is very much obviously collage. It's more now, I'm just doing it in a different medium. It's, I still want music which evokes an emotion. Like if I'm writing about something that when I was 15, I listened to the music that I listened to so that I can become that entity. And so I think it's just a different medium for me of how I collage things. Sometimes I was a writer, producer, editor of the film. I would, Katarina did my first film with me, where it was called Up the Wall. And it was literally about a self-portrait that comes to life. And it was about an artist trying to find their voice. So it was very interesting. Like I didn't realize all these things about myself until you get a kind of retrospective work. And then all of a sudden you see patterns. And I don't try to change the pattern. I've always enjoyed collage. And Katarina also enjoys it. And that's just part of how we work. But her work isn't always collage. So, but it is when it's with me at this point.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing fascinating insights. And
Thank
next, there it is. Yes. Amber, could you please tell us about this wonderful painting?
Yes, okay. Off the bat, I'll say I think it's quite interesting and telling, again, of our sort of artistic compatibility between all of us here, that we've picked pieces that explicitly show us or represent us, because I'm in this painting. This is the only painting, and I didn't know what you guys had picked. So that's so funny. This is the only painting that I'm in. I think I picked this painting because it's the first house I ever did. Before the pandemic, that sparked this chain of endless houses I seem to be painting. I want to speak to the relationship I have to this house, the impacts I've gathered that this piece has on people, and I'll talk about the technical execution as well. So this is a house that's in Washington. It's right across the border, probably less than a kilometer across, that I found. I've been tracking it for probably close to 10 years. I found it when I was a teenager. I never let go of it. I never forgot it. I thought it was stunning. It was just tucked away in this little property and had apple trees and lace curtains. And I find that properties that are abandoned in Washington, they tend to stay that way. They really just melt into the ground. I feel like there's not that much vandalism. I don't see a lot of evidence of squatting. And even with this very, very accessible property, for 10 years, it's sat pretty well kept. At some point, there was like a white handprint on the door someone had smeared down, trying to be dramatic, I guess, but it would have been better in red. So yeah, I kept my eye on it. I would take photos of it. And I wanted to approach respectfully, but it was always surrounded by prickle bushes and foliage, and I'm afraid of snakes. There's tons. That's one of the, with this hobby of mine, tracking down these houses, I'm so afraid of snakes that it holds me back all the time, because these houses are always covered in grass and warm stone cement. So it was a February day. I had crossed the border with a friend just to adventure. And there was a path for the first time in like the dead winter brush that we could go down. And I felt confident that there wouldn't be any snakes this time of year. Who knows if that's true, but this day I didn't see any. So my friend had snapped a photo of me with the house, which is what this painting is based off of. I always paint from reference. It's the only photo I have with it. I never felt like I got a great photo of it anyways, because I couldn't quite shoot through the bushes the way I wanted to, but I tried for years and years and years and years. So I finally went to paint it. I was just curious about painting a house. And I put one stroke of paint down. It's kind of above this window here, the dark roof. And I hated it. I thought it was the worst color. I thought that I totally messed up the consistency. And I was so upset that I put it on a shelf for probably 2 years. And then I took it back down and painted it. So that's a lesson that most things are workable when you think you've made a mistake. But it was just the reaction I guess I needed to finish it the way I wanted. Yeah, the reception I get from this painting often from people, and I kind of dislike telling people what the history is of each house and the history of each reference when I took the references, because often those days are quite interesting and either chaotic or sort of emotional. But I don't like telling people what to feel. I don't think any artist or any painter would about their work, right? So it's difficult to explain it, but I often get a very nostalgic reaction to this painting. I have people who tell me it's warm. I have people who tell me it's safe. I have people who immediately tell me about their grandparents' house, because this kind of house is quite common, I feel, across BC decades ago, and obviously Washington, and it just looks like a farmhouse. It looks like a family house. It's not in that intense a state of decay, right? It looks inhabitable in this painting, in my opinion. So compared to a lot of my other paintings of very explicit abandoned and deterioration, people react fondly to this piece. Perhaps it's because there's somebody in the frame as well, and that communicates some sort of accessibility. Technically, this painting, I chose this one because I feel like I never mentioned this fact, and I find it interesting. I painted this in primary colors. So I only used red, blue, and yellow, and white. It was early days, and now I have quite an extensive array of colors, but I didn't have anything like green, I didn't have brown, I didn't have purple or kind of more classic colors like yellow ochre, or you know, the sort of names that we can spout out, like Bob Ross when he names his palette. And I paint very small. I'm actually sitting at my art desk now, pull out a brush that I often use. It's this one. You see it? It's like this. I don't know why I do this. It's the size of a toothpick, and I can't stop painting this way. This one, I don't think, besides probably the green and maybe the sky, I don't think I put down a stroke of paint that was anything larger than this paintbrush. And most of my pieces I don't. I'd like to move out of that and paint a little larger. It would save me a lot of time, but it's just the way I do it, I guess. yeah, so this house, also to close this off, I was worried about it during the pandemic. Of course, we couldn't cross the border, couldn't check on it, and I was thinking about it. There's a lot of things to worry about in the pandemic, and I was definitely thinking about this house. I just felt like it was prime real estate, and surely somebody had their eye on it. So I think maybe 6 months ago, my parents had crossed the border, and I asked my mom, I said, can you guys just drive by that white house I like and just check on it? She said, yeah, no problem. And bless my mom, but she texted me, she goes, just went by the house. And I went, oh, good. It's been a year or so since I've seen it. And then she sends me pictures and she says, it's been demolished and there's a parking lot. And
Oh,
the pictures she sent me were just like, paved concrete. And so, yeah, unfortunately, it has met its end. It had a good 10 years in my life, at least. I felt incredibly fond of it. I feel fond towards every house I've painted. That's why I paint them. But this one especially, I think this one sparked the curiosity, the physical exploration for me and my painting journey. Yeah. I think that's all I have to say.
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Sorry to hear that it's gone now, but at least this painting will live on.
Thank you.
Its memory will live on. And it's fascinating to hear such personal connections with your subjects with these houses, because they're, to most people, they're probably just a building, especially in such disrepair and decay as some of them are. But you seem to have a real emotional connection with all these places that you're discovering. Has that been something, like you said, for 10 years, you've been following, had a relationship with this house? Is that something that you've kind of always felt throughout your life, these deep connections to spaces like this?
I think so. I've always been a sensitive person. I was a sensitive child. I loved stuffed animals. Yeah, definitely towards houses, I take on this feeling of, whether I'm in the right to, but a feeling of guardianship almost. And definitely I project strong emotions onto houses, which I understand logically don't feel emotions and don't have emotions. But I just project like loneliness, abandonment. You start to wonder about I also just find vintage and old things fascinating, and all kinds of things, clothes and items, and of course houses and monuments. But I start to think about who lived there and what happened and how old is it. But beyond those sort of, I feel, very normal sort of impulses and curiosity, I definitely project. I want to visit. I want to spend time there. They tend to also be quiet places. They're contemplative if they're safe, right? There's kind of a difference between a lonely farmhouse and like a warehouse in the city that is frequented, but they tend to be places that animals visit. I can go by myself. I can just take photos. I can sit. So yeah, I put a lot of emotion onto them. Eats me up. It really does.
Yeah.
I find often buildings, they're characters and
Mhm.
they all have stories. So I totally understand the intimacy, the kind of emotional intimacy you feel with buildings. I feel that way too. And because I want to know the stories. I'm a curious person, so I always am like, oh, who lives there? Who lived there? Why did they, leave? Or I understand that curiosity and kindness toward these type of buildings. I'm always curious of their lives
Yeah,
previous.
thank you. I know I
Yeah.
have a crowd out there. I have some company in the way I see these. They have history, they have energy. There's also some places that um, I go to and they freak me out, and they're not that different from any other house that I've found. But of course, there could be a very simple explanation, like I heard something and didn't register the snapping of a branch, and now my nervous system is on fire. But you like to, you like to think about those things more kind of supernaturally or intuitively, and you're like, oh, something's telling me. It's playful. It's kind of fun to walk into a space that trips you up a bit too. Again, in a pretty safe way.
I think there's probably really a lot that we get out of seeing places that other people have lived in that we're not specifically aware of, but subconsciously we are. So like, who knows what the actual story of the house is, but then you kind of see, I mean, maybe things like the handprint on the door that's so obvious, but maybe just things like how certain areas are worn or something, and maybe subconsciously we get those. And I feel like in your paintings, partly because they're so small that you have to get really close and then you're already there, and it just occurred to me how fitting the title of the show is in that case. But anyway, but also your personal experience is so much in the lines and the kind of like, this isn't just a photo, it's the way you've rendered it, right? And there's so much emotion in the way you've done it with your teeny weeny little paintbrush. And like, I just think that's the gift, is you're sharing your whatever that perception is of the house's story. And it's so nice to to see that this house has a story. The house that we will never see because now it's sadly a parking lot.
Yeah. No. My next goal, next time I go to Washington, I'd like to ask around a bit about this house, because people tend to know in this area it's a very slow moving county.
Yeah.
And even if I could go to City Hall or something and ask, I'd like to know. I'm sure there's some kind of record.
Yeah. The neighbors, bring them your painting, be like, hello, have you seen this house?
I'll try that.
That's, again, awesome. Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing. And thanks everyone for talking about these works and everything that you put into them emotionally and intellectually and physically. Just a couple of comments from some people watching. L. Jones says, amazing. Thank you, L. Jones. It is amazing work. Jonathan Connolly says, incredible work, guys.
Oh,
totally agree, Jonathan. Thank you. And as you had said, Emily, the title is fantastic. Take yourself there, because all of these works in here are really transportive. I think there's a real, it's because you've all put these stories to them, right? And so much of yourselves in them that you really can move to these different spaces, whether it's a physical space, a mental space, an emotional space. It really is a transportive kind of exhibition, which I think is kind of what we all hope art will do. So I think we've said all we're going to say. I'm sure we could say more. There's so much to say, and you all have such fascinating things. But I would, again, love to encourage you all to come down and see the exhibit. Take yourself there at the Silk Purse Art Center in West Vancouver. It's on until August 18th. So if you're watching this before then, please come and check it out. And if you're watching this before August the 2nd, we're having a reception. It's from 5:30 to 7. Come on down, meet the artists, see the work in person, chat with them, and just have a great time. So again, I would love to thank our fantastic artists who were here and our artist who was not here. So thank you, Katarina Thorsen, Patti Henderson, Amber Nordstrand, and Emily van Lidth de Jeude for sharing your fascinating artwork with us and for sharing your insights in this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
See you on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, see you on Friday. Take care. And if you watching want to know any more about the Arts Council or our fantastic artists, In the description of this video, there's links to websites and social media. So please stay in touch, see what they're all up to. And until next time, when we talk more about art, take care and enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.